welcome everyone to our panel tonight. It's titled Research is for Everyone. And so we have some special guests with us today who come from a variety of departments and different positions at the university to talk to you a little bit about research and what is it, how do you get involved, how do you approach research for classes, all kinds of things. I want to thank you all who submitted questions. I've included, I think, all of them in tonight's discussion. If we don't get to all of them and you still would like to follow up, please let Dr. Graham or Dr. Whittington know, and we'll make sure that we connect you with one of our panelists to get an answer. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. And just for ease of passing off discussion, I'm going to go across the top of my screen. And then from there, when we pursue the remaining questions, our panelists can just jump in as they see fit. So I'll have you introduce yourself. And Jonathan, you're actually first.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Jonathan Howe. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am a third-year doctoral candidate in the Higher Ed and Student Affairs program. My research interests lie in race, sport, and higher education. So I look at Black male student athletes primarily, and identity in Black male student athletes. I'm from the great state of Texas, did my undergrad and master's at the University of Texas at Austin, undergrad in corporate communications and master's in sport management. And so that's led me here to Ohio State today. So glad to be with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Kaity, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Kaity Prieto. I use she, her pronouns. I know some of you from the BG Summer Pilots. I'm excited to see everybody again. So I work as the University Innovation Alliance Fellow, actually with Dr. David Graham here at Ohio State. I also recently finished my Ph.D. in the same program Jonathan is in now, the Higher Education and Student Affairs program. So altogether, I've been at OSU for about 4.5 years or so. Originally from New Jersey, and I did my undergrad and master's both at New York University. So my undergrad, that is a long story, but it was a self-design major, and my master's was in higher ed and student affairs. And my research interests generally center around LGBTQ+ student success and experiences, with a particular focus on bisexual, pansexual, and fluid student identities.
Great, thank you very much. And then last but not least, Megan.
Hi, everybody. I am Megan LePere-Schloop. You can just call me Megan LS if that's helpful. I use she, her pronouns. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan, and proud graduate of Detroit Public Schools. And then I went to undergrad at Oberlin College, actually, where I was a history major and French minor. And then I spent about 10 years in between undergrad and going to get my master's degree, working in Detroit Public Schools and then working in a youth development nonprofit. And then I decided to go back and get my master's. And so I'm a bit of, I wouldn't say I'm the only person by any stretch, at least in my field, who has actually had a career outside of academia before coming into academia. And maybe that's something that we can talk about. But after that, I decided to get my master's and then pursue a PhD at the University of Georgia. And I've been at Ohio State in the John Glenn College of Public Affairs for about 4 years now. And I teach and research in nonprofit management. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of the kind of work that I do. So I've got an ongoing project right now about sexual harassment in public and nonprofit organizations, specifically with fundraisers and social workers who interact with a lot of people outside of their organization. I've got a research project on trauma, like the residual effects of trauma and policing. And then I have work on some big systems of nonprofit organizations like the United Way and community foundations and kind of the work that they're doing in local communities. So looking forward to hearing about some of your questions, and I think that's it for now.
Great, thank you so much. So between the three of you, if there's anything that you would like to add or talk about with regards to the types of research you've been involved in. So that could be projects of your own, college research that you did while in school, a thesis or dissertation, other cool projects. Would anyone like to share the types of research to help us get an idea of what research can be?
Yeah, I can get started with that. So I've been involved in multiple projects from more of a practitioner standpoint and helping with industry. And so, I mean, I think the earliest research project I was involved in was during my master's program, helping the San Antonio Spurs with some market research and consultation with them. And then leading to a thesis project that I did at the University of Texas, where I did a study on the experiences of African-American collegiate football coaches. And then into right now, what I'm doing in my dissertation is looking at self-presentation and identity within Black male student athletes at the Division I level. And then in between there, just a lot of various studies looking at race and athletic administration at the collegiate level, and even, you know, random projects with topics that I'm not really an expert in, such as engineering and diversity within engineering programs. And so pretty wide range of experience in the research setting.
That's great, Jonathan. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that topics you're not an expert in, because I think that's one of the misconceptions, that you have to be an expert in something in order to research it.
Yeah, so I can jump in too. I got started with research in undergrad, but in some non-traditional ways. So I was in a first-year seminar where I explored the effects of a particular acne treatment on birth defects. I'm not going to get too far into that, but it wasn't laboratory research, right? It was more about synthesizing work that had already been done and trying to understand it for myself. So not so much about creating new knowledge, but learning the skills of how you investigate things, right? And learning from folks who have done that work. Definitely didn't go into the medical field. I think that's clear. My senior thesis was on Soviet bureaucracy, actually, and how systems become bureaucratic and full of red tape, which was super interesting. Again, that was more about a historical project. And now my dissertation research looked at the experiences of bisexual college students and how they experience their identity across campus. And I currently have an active research project with a doctoral student in the HESA program here at Ohio State, looking at that same experience, but for graduate students across the country. So really exciting to see how what I found for undergrads might or might not be true for a similar but different group of students. And then, like Jonathan, I've been pulled into projects that are really not immediately in my comfort zone, but are adjacent to the work that I do. So student success research, looking at everything from textbook affordability to right now, some impacts of advising on student experiences. And so, yeah, totally agree. You don't have to be an expert. There are a lot of ways you can support work that your peers or colleagues or instructors are already doing and kind of lend a helping hand that way.
All right, I'll jump in. Actually, this question, I hadn't really thought about undergrad in a long time, so this got me thinking in a different way. And at Oberlin, so I didn't design my own major like it sounds like Katie did, but we had an opportunity where we could do, I guess at OSU it might be called a directed reading. So it was kind of like you could pick the topic and then you would work with a professor to choose readings, and then that person would kind of work with you over the semester. And I was actually really interested in culture and dance in undergrad. And so I did a directed reading on the Argentine tango and all of the history that's involved in that, which is really interesting. It's like very tied up with colonialism, and there's all kinds of issues of race and sexuality. So that was one undergraduate research project I did. And then I also studied abroad when I was in undergrad, and I actually chose the program that I went abroad on because it had an option for an individual research project, which could be like, it was pretty open. And so I went to Senegal in West Africa, and a friend of mine and I were both interested in dance. So we actually ended up living and studying with a griot family who griots in West African culture are kind of like the families that keep the history and the culture of the local community. So we got to live with a griot family, and then we went to the National Conservatory, and our project was on dance and culture. I had friends who were there. We were there during a national election, so they actually studied national elections there. That was their research project. So I think I'm bringing this up because I think there are, sometimes you can choose opportunities to set yourself up for research projects that are pretty open-ended, so you can do what you really are interested in doing. I would say working at a nonprofit, research was part of my job. You know, we had to do reports for grants, and so I had to understand what our different programs were doing and how the effect that it was having on the young people that we were working with. And then when I went to get my master's in public affairs, especially, a lot of times you can get funding to go for a master's program if there's like a kind of government institute or like kind of practitioner oriented research institute on a campus. So I worked at an institute that supported local governments across the state of Georgia. And it was really, I mean, talk about things that I was not an expert in. Like, I did a report on splash pads and, you know, how they could be economically beneficial to local governments. We did one that was a little bit more aligned with my past experience, that was on kind of funding for a local theater that was part of the local government. And then moving into my PhD, that was, so I should say, before I went into my doctorate program, I really had no desire to do anything related to policing. Where I come from in Detroit, the community historically has not had a really great level of trust with police officers, and we're seeing that kind of play out right now. But when I got to my PhD, one of my professors had done a lot of work on African-American police officers and police leaders, and he was really interested in campus police departments. So through connecting with him, I was able to do a research project that looked at campus policing and get to interview both a lot of students and campus police officers about that. So I think hopefully this gives you a sense of there's so many different ways that research plays out, and it's not even all just in academia either.
That's great. In fact, listening between the three of you, I hear you talking about interviewing people, surveys, big data sets that already exist, historical data, looking back at what people have written or done, observational data, economic data, government data. And then also, I think one of the things that you've mentioned that really stands out to me is I hear you saying that the projects that you're doing are tackling real world issues. I think sometimes there's this idea that research is just on, I don't know, not maybe something in the past or just some, I don't know that everyone understands that a project can be something that is happening right now, that's catching your interest right now, that's happening in the world right now. And that kind of leads me into my next question is, what should a student know about doing research in college? And I'll start with by asking, what should a student know about finding a topic for research?
Well, I want to jump in here really quick because there's a quote that I absolutely love by a qualitative researcher named Corinne Glesney, and it's, or actually, no, sorry, thinking about a different thing. Narrative researchers, Clarendon and Connolly, they do a lot of interviews with people, right? And they have this quote that all research is autobiographical. And so I would say, start by looking at yourself, right? So for me, I'm studying an identity that I hold, something that's personally important to me, something that's impacted my higher education experience and that of my peers. But I think it doesn't have to be tapped into your personal identity either. It could just be something you care deeply about. I think research takes a lot of time and energy. And so to draw on something that you know is important to you, important to your community, important to your field is, I think, just a really great place to start.
Can I jump in and build on that? So I think that that this point about research connecting to parts of your identity that are important to you can be really important, because those identities give you insight into research questions and how to do research and how to talk to people and maybe think about even data that is not based on interviews or surveys. in a way that's really important. And so one example of that from what I was mentioning before is fundraising. So because of my career in the nonprofit sector, and because of my co-author's career in marketing, we both had a really practical sense of some of the issues that people face in the when they're working a lot outside of their organizations. And that's really part of what led us to pose questions that nobody else had really been posing before, because we had that personal insight and that personal experience. So I think that one thing to really keep in mind, especially, I have this conversation with myself sometimes because it's easy to feel like, do I really belong here in academia? Am I smart enough? Do I have the skill set? Everybody else is so intelligent and skilled. But one thing that they don't have is my perspective and my experiences to bring to bear on the research that I want to do. And I think that that helps me to remember that I do have the skills, I do have the intelligence to do the research, but also I have a perspective that's really valuable. And if I don't bring it, then nobody else might bring it. So I think that's a really important thing to remember. The other thing I would put out there for you as thinking about research at the undergraduate level is that sometimes it's just about learning the research skills at that point and like coming on to, you don't always have to try to come up with your own original insight or idea at this point. Like part of it is just the value of being involved in a research project because it kind of sets you up for opportunities later on in the future. So, and I think sometimes feeling like you have to have all of your own ideas can actually get in the way sometimes of being part of someone else's research project. If you're like constantly looking for how you change things, like sometimes people want to actually just mentor you and help you to develop skills that you can then in the future take forward and apply to some of your own ideas. So I think, I know what I'm saying might sound a little bit contradictory, but I think it's important to hold both of those things at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with both Kaity and Megan about the type of research you should be doing. Do something that interests you. Kaity made a great point about just the process of research can be long, it can be tedious, and so you want to find something that you're really interested in and invested in. I know for me, you know, I always like to quote that research is research, and as Kaity said, it's autobiographical. And so for me, obviously I identify as a Black male, and so those are, I look at issues of race pertaining to Black people. That's something I deeply care about, but also my experiences, and that's what I think is important to tie on too. Is research something that you're experienced on, which what I think Megan was talking about a little bit as well. It adds some perspective, but it also makes you more invested. So I worked in intercollegiate athletics when I was at the University of Texas, and I was around the football program, and so that's what sparked my interest into research in the sport realm. And so I have that inside look. You know, a lot of people like sports and play sports growing up, but not a lot of people work at the Division I collegiate athletic level. And so I have a perspective that other scholars may not have. So someone may be doing similar research to me, but I have something that sets me apart from other people. And so I think first and foremost, find something that you're really interested in. And then when it gets tough, that you don't mind putting in the work to continue doing that research. So really it's about your interest and what'll keep moving you forward.
This is all really great advice. Thanks to each of you. And I want to be sure to say as well, so we have 3 panelists tonight who represent the social sciences, but all of the advice they're giving you can be applied to the hard sciences as well. And I think it's important to realize that your identity matters, and the identity of the people you're working with matters, even in research that's done in the hard sciences. So thinking about how hard sciences can be used to help communities and populations, but also recognizing where scientific research has only been done to support one specific group of people or the health of one specific group of people, or where scientific research has been done on a specific group of people and what those impacts have been as well. So, you know, I don't know the major of everyone in the room tonight, but, you know, if you are a hard science major, I want to make sure that you know that what you care about and believe in your identity can absolutely be translated into that area of research as well. And that leads me into my next question, which is, I mean, this actually kind of goes together. So thinking about how you approach research and also what qualifies as worthy or not worthy research.
I guess I'll start on this one. I guess I want to address the second question first, just what counts as worthy research and what's not worthy research. I think a major problem in academia, right, is people dictating what is worthy research and what is not worthy research. And, you know, I know for me, I don't have my Ph.D. yet, but I'm working to attain that. And I know that you as undergrads may not have the credentials behind your name, but don't let people dictate what you feel is important and what's not important. So if you care deeply about a topic, go and research that topic, right? Don't let someone say, oh, well, this is something we don't really research, deter you from doing that, or this isn't the way you should be doing it. Don't let that deter you from doing the research that you really want to be invested in and really want to be interested in. So just how you approach research and how I approach research is that I'm going to do what I want to do. You're investing your time into it, so make sure that you're doing what you want to do. And I know as undergrads, you may be working underneath someone, right? So you may be taking on their work. That's part of the process. So you will have to do that. But when you're going through your own work, make sure that you're doing something that you really want to do.
I guess I'll jump in. I think that one thing that I really want to emphasize that Jonathan just alluded to is at the undergrad level, it really, if you think that you're interested in research, it's at that point, a really important step is just starting to get the skills and like get some exposure to what it's like to be part of a research project and to, you know, build some confidence through doing things. And so I would just encourage you to, if you think that it's something that you might be interested in, this is a period in your life where you get to kind of experiment in a way that is a little bit harder to do, I would say, as you get older, because you're just in a setting where there are opportunities that that don't always exist as readily outside of like after you graduate. So I would say just, you know, experiment, give yourself the chance to find out if you like doing research. And then as you grow into your own as a researcher, I think what Jonathan is saying is really essential. Like the project that I was describing earlier about sexual harassment is something that one of my mentors actually kind of discouraged initially, and now it's really, it's bearing fruit, and it's something that my co-author and I stuck with, not only because we thought it was interesting and important from our own perspective, but because the people that we were talking to that had been through these experiences, we just really wanted to make sure that their voices were heard and that this issue was being addressed. And so I think that that can be a really important motivator in doing research. And so, and if you're doing research that you're passionate about, you're more likely to be kind of creating new knowledge and pushing innovation as well, because that's what's guiding you, not like what everybody else is telling you that you need to do. So I don't know, Katie, if you have any other perspective on that, but.
I mean, I completely agree with all of that. And I think one thing I would just want to make sure I say tonight is, you know, don't let this perceived lack of skills get in your way. Like if you're here thinking, well, I've never taken a statistics class or I've never taken a class on research, that doesn't mean that you can't contribute in really incredible ways to work. The first two projects I mentioned that I was involved in undergrad were based purely on looking through library resources, right? Googling in a way. And so I think as Jonathan mentioned, you might get started working for someone, and that's an opportunity to learn new skills alongside that person. But I just think sometimes the hardest part is getting started and making the ask of a faculty member that's talking about work that's exciting to you, or asking a more senior friend who's involved in a project, hey, like, do you think you could get me an introduction, or is there a place for me on your team? So for me, I think that held me back a lot in my master's program, because I didn't think I could get involved because I didn't have the skills yet, right? So just ask.
Thank you, Katie. And I want to see if either Jonathan or Megan wants to add to the ideas of how students can get involved in research, knowing, of course, in the era of COVID that not a lot of, there are fewer opportunities than there may be in a non-COVID year, let's say, and thinking not just about getting involved maybe with like a professor or a lab, but also thinking about in your own classes, like ways that you can get connected that way. And Katie, also, if you want to add anything, please feel free.
Jonathan, I'll let you go first, actually.
All right. Yeah, I think, I think less opportunities may be available for COVID, but also I'm going to contradict myself. I think there may be more opportunity for especially undergrads to get their foot in the door because of COVID. I know COVID is stressing a lot of people out. It has not made research easier. And so this may be a prime opportunity for you to get your foot in the door and to lend a helping hand wherever that may be. If someone needs help writing a literature review, right? If you have the skills to write papers, you are at Ohio State, I'm sure you've had to write plenty of papers in your life. You have skills in that you can already apply to specific research projects. You can, if you need to read over transcripts, right? You can find a way to make yourself, useful to a faculty member, to a doctoral student in some way that you can contribute to the research process. So I think it's about asking the appropriate questions. How can I assist in, in any research that you have going on? I can help with X, Y, and Z. I may not be too advanced, so I may not be able to help with sort of methodological front, but I can do certain things. I can edit papers, right? I think there's a way that you can get in the door with research during COVID that may be harder to get into if you were in an in-person setting, because a lot of times people are restricted with their research. They work with certain people, but COVID may open that door to allow you to get your foot in the door with people you may not usually do that with.
Well, the one other thing I would just add to that is when I was an undergrad, I wasn't paying attention to what my professors were researching. That was like not, I mean, I didn't even know that we did have websites back then, but I wasn't looking at people's websites to see what they were researching. And I think the best advice that I can give you is actually based on when we were working on that campus policing research project that I was telling you guys about earlier. We actually had an undergrad with us, and she was really instrumental in helping us to recruit students for focus groups and actually helping to facilitate those focus groups. And the way that she got involved is, I actually don't even remember how she met Brian, the lead researcher on that project. I think it was probably through something like this. And when she heard that he was doing research on community policing and research that thought about policing through the lens of race, she just approached him and said, what research projects are you working on right now? And is there a way that I can get involved? And so I'm sharing this to say that doing a little bit of background work on who your professors are and the kind of work that they're doing, and leveraging maybe some of the relationships that you're building with people in the classroom or that you're building through your colleges can be a really important starting point. And if a student comes to me and says, hey, I know that you're doing work on this and I'm interested in this, then that kind of helps open the door a little bit more than just kind of broadly saying, I'm interested in doing research. Could I potentially work with you? Like if they're invested in a particular project that I'm also invested in. I think that helps. So I think that's one thing I would say. And just out of curiosity, do we have any engineers or computer science folks on this call tonight?
Yeah, I am.
I am as well.
Ray, and could you guys do like a virtual hand up so I know who just said I am, because it's kind of hard to tell right now. Like this.
It looks like we have 3 folks who raised their hands.
Okay, maybe I just can't see you on my screen then. Well, what I was going to say is, you know, Amy was talking about how identity can be important in the hard sciences, and I actually use a lot of machine learning and natural language processing in some of my organizational research. And I just want to put out there that I think particularly in computer science and engineering, as it's in, you know, especially when it's related to programming, being able to view that work through your personal identities is really important work, because there are so many issues about bias in training data that is actually affecting algorithms, and algorithms that are now being used in really consequential ways, both in the private sector and in government agencies right now. So I just wanted to provide one example that of how that works and how that's important in the hard sciences. So can't emphasize enough that when you're coming from a background that gives you some important perspective on things, that it's really important to value that and to bring that to the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Katie, is there any last thoughts you would like to add?
No, I mean, I think that was great advice, so I would just co-sign it.
Great, thank you. So in the interest of all of our time, I want to kind of wrap up here. If you want to think about either some last thoughts that you would like to share with students, or why is it that students should care about research? Does research actually make a difference? Any remaining thoughts that you have?
So I think for me, I've seen in just the short amount of time that I've been involved in higher education research that there is a huge paradigm shift. Maybe I'm overselling it, but there's definitely a paradigm shift in the way that we think about things. More and more folks are using, kind of taking a critical lens that looks at systems of power and oppression and how that's excluding folks on campuses. People are being more expansive in the way they do statistical analyses, right? So we're not just asking for people to check a male, female box, but we're giving folks options to express their gender identity. So essentially, people are pushing research forward in ways that are just making it incredibly, or a lot more ethical and equity minded. And I think that you all have the opportunity to get involved in that push forward as well, if that's something that's important to you. Essentially, right, I think y'all are bringing new perspectives to the table. You have new questions that haven't been asked yet, potentially, because you're growing up in a different time. And so I think it's just important that you make that a part of the work that's being done. And I think I mentioned before, right, not sell yourself short because you're undergrads. That doesn't mean that you don't have an opportunity to make an impact in the work that's being done on college campuses in a variety of fields.
Yeah, echo everything that Katie just said. One thing that may seem very basic, but I had no idea about when I was an undergrad is Google Scholar. That saved my life. Just being able to search on Google Scholar and allow myself to find out what work is out there. And so when we talk about where do you start with research, what can you do, it's really just become knowledgeable about what's out there. And so, I mean, if you go to Google Scholar and just type in a random topic, right? I mean, you're going to get most resources. Some resources are locked. You have to go through OSU's website to get to them, but that's a great starting point just to really figure out what's out there. If you want to, we talked a lot about setting yourself apart in research. And if you want to learn how to set yourself apart, you really just have to understand what's already being said out there. And then also what has been mentioned time and time again tonight is don't be afraid to start. you don't even have to partner with anyone, right? You can do your own work on your own time, and then, get someone maybe to look over it and see, ask questions. Hey, I'm trying to do this project. I'm off to a good start. You can utilize resources around you. Utilize me if you need to, right? Just utilize people in your network who may have the skills, right? And you can just ask. So that's a big one. Just utilize your network. Also utilize your expertise, and remember to do whatever you're passionate about, and don't let anyone dictate what you will and will not do in your research.
Thank you. And before we have Megan jump in here, I just want to say a theme I'm hearing tonight between the lines is curiosity. So take the time to think about what interests you, what intrigues you, questions that you have about the world. And so, Megan, before you give your final thoughts, I noticed you had also put in the chat, if any of you have questions, you want to feel free to put them in the chat, or you can jump in with them too.
Amy Maddie has a question in the chat about what journals OSU students can access.
Amy,
Great.
is it okay
Yeah.
if I share my screen real quick?
Yes, I think I might have to give you that option.
Okay, it looks like it's working. So,
okay, great.
Madeline, just because Jonathan mentioned Google Scholar, which I also think is awesome. I just want to show you one. You have access to a ton of journals, in short, through OSU. But to be able to connect the journals that you have access to through OSU to your Google Scholar account, let me just show you one thing really quickly. So I've got Google Scholar open. I'm going up into this left-hand box, and I can actually set. Sorry, that's different. Sorry, I should have set this. Okay, I'm under settings and library links, and you'll notice that the Ohio State University Libraries is listed on here because I basically did a search for that. And what this just allows me to do is when I go and I do a search in Google Scholar, so let's just say, then it will actually tell me if I have access to things automatically through OSU. So that would be, I'm not directly answering your question, Madeline, but that's, I think, a really great resource to know about. And I would also, the other thing that I don't think I really understood as an undergrad, I don't know if this is true for you, Jonathan and Katie as well, but I really did not understand what a resource librarians were and didn't even really think to reach out and connect. So you have a librarian who is associated with whatever your degree program is, whatever your college is, and you can actually reach out to them just individually and have them talk you through some of the resources that might be most relevant to you that you have access to as an OSU student. And it looks like Amy's saying the same thing. So
your research librarians love to hear from you. They don't get enough students who utilize their expertise, so they would love to help you. I'm telling you that straight from one of their mouths.
Yeah.
And this has probably been hammered into you by Amy and Amanda and your STEP leaders, but faculty also want you to go to their office hours, right? That's another population that's probably not seeing enough of you. So when we talked about how do you make those asks to get involved in research, establishing that relationship by checking in their office hours and ask, like, what are you up to, is probably another great way to do that.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that faculty members love talking about themselves. And so Megan made the point earlier about, just figuring out what your instructors are working on. And so if you go to an office hour, as Katie mentioned, and you ask them about their work, they'll have the biggest smile you ever seen, and they'll talk for hours and hours, right? And so that's the way to get in, get your foot in the door with faculty members, is just know what they're working on, because they love talking about the work in themselves. So
I really just want to co-sign what Jonathan just said. Like, if they don't, because I also don't think many of my professors introduce themselves at the beginning of their classes by talking about their research. I actually try to do that now because I want people to come and talk to me if they're interested in being involved in any of the research projects that I'm working on. But I think just that initial meeting, if you're not sure that you want to be involved with a professor on research, that's a really good way to kind of feel them out and see what they're doing and how they talk about it, and if you think it might be something that you want to do. And it also kind of lays a bit of a foundation that would make it comfortable for you to follow up again with that professor if you do decide that you want to reach out and ask if you can get involved. I just realized one technical thing that maybe you guys might want to know is that if you're doing interested in doing any research on people that it actually involves talking to them, that you do have to go through like a training process so that you can be a responsible researcher working with people. So I'm just putting that bug in your ear because that is one of the first things that we have had to have undergrads go through, is like a training process. And it's definitely not impossible, but it's not short. I'm not going to lie to you either. So like, just be prepared that if someone circles back around and is like, sure, and you would need to do this to be involved, that's not abnormal. That's what all of us have to do if we're working with people.
Kaity, I saw you nodding your head. Did you want to add anything?
It's a tedious training, and I think it catches folks off guard, right? When you're like, I'm ready to go, and then you're not. So yeah, start early if that's something that might be of interest to you.
And I don't want that to scare you either. I'm someone who has gone through that training as well. The whole point is to make sure that we are researchers who think carefully about what research we're doing and who we're doing it with, so that we're not doing anything that's unethical or illegal or intentionally hurtful for other people. So it's a training that takes a little bit of time, but you do it online and you learn a lot about how research has hurt people in the past and why we need to be careful about doing it the right way. And that would involve any research that involves people. So whether you're doing social science research or medical research or hard research. So I want to give one last minute if anyone has other questions to pop in the chat. I also want to be sure to mention to check out the Office of Undergraduate Research and Creative Inquiry. I've put a website link in the chat to their frequently asked questions page, where they do talk a little bit about benefits of research and getting involved and answer some of those questions. You can browse their website as well. It tells you a little bit more about how to get involved in the different types of projects. One thing that I like about this office is they also show you that if you're interested in the arts, if you're interested in dance, if you're interested in other forms of creativity, that you can still do research with that as well. Research is not just limited to social science or the hard sciences. Yeah, thank you, Megan. It's called CITI, City Certification for Human Subjects, is the training that we're talking about. If there's any last questions, to put in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. I'll give us a moment here.